there was a rusted out Ford Econoline when I arrived in Maupin, and some of the guides were like, "Hey man, we've been waiting on you. Welcome. These are your digs for the summer." And I was like, "You serious? This is it?" And I didn't come in expecting much, but I just didn't know it was going to be legitimate, like Chris Farley style.
Well, I'm very excited about this week's episode of the Remote No Pressure Podcast, Bill.
Yeah, awesome.
We have Drew De Vries, who's going to be here from the Adventure Deficit podcast.
Awesome.
He's a local guy. And did you hear my interview on his podcast? I'm going to put you on the spot.
I did. Yep, I listened.
One person. Thanks, Bill.
I gave it a 1 star. I'm kidding.
I don't know if you guys listened to last week's episode, but you totally get it if you got last week's episode. Well, thank you for the 1 star. We pulled the analysis on it, and there was 1 download, and it must have been you, Bill. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm here to chip in.
Do your part.
That's right.
Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, Drew had me on his podcast, and it was a lot of fun asking me about my story and why we started the podcast. And if you follow him at Adventure Deficit, you can go to his podcast too and have a listen to some more stuff about me and why Remote No Pressure got started. So that was very nice of him to invite me.
Yeah.
on. So we had him on, and he was actually one of the first interviews I did for season 2. But a lot of people don't understand. We record these in bulk.
Yeah. And that's how it works.
And that's how it works. So I think it was a warm day when I interviewed Drew. I think it was like a warmer day.
It was a warm day that
day.
The sun was shining, unlike today.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was really cool. And, we talk a lot about Remote No Pressure. The name of the podcast. I had a friend of mine. I was at dinner last night. And a friend's like, he's never listened to the podcast. He's into fly fishing, but he's an older guy. He's not really like into the podcasting thing.
Yeah.
Well, they're starting to.
Can I get it on tape?
Yeah. Can you have that on tape? No, but he's a really cool guy, and he's kind of adapting to the podcasting. He's kind of dipping his heels into it or whatever. And he's like, so do you talk like about remote places and things like that? I was like, well, we probably should talk a little bit more about remote places and no pressure and things like that. So it's
more of a philosophy right now. It's
more of a philosophy. How can you be remote even where you live, and reduce your pressure? So I want to talk a little bit about how you reduce your pressure because, when you came here today, we talked a little bit. We had some coffee. We were joking around like we normally do. It's a good time. Is your phone ringing?
Nope. I felt a little vibration. Sorry. Wow. Talk about no pressure. I'm just going to set this over here.
Always connected.
Awkward. I know.
Always connected. I
left the watch at home today.
You did on purpose?
Yep. Well, no. I drove here and I'm like, left the watch at home today.
Yeah. It's your phone is getting alerted that it got left.
Yep.
Like, that's how. No, but last night when we went to dinner, I intentionally left my phone at home because, like, I'm addicted to it. I'm not gonna lie.
Technology is like when I leave my phone at home and I go to work, I feel naked all day. It's like leaving my keys at home.
I think it's worse than leaving your keys.
Because I can always find somebody at work with keys. Right. Where I can't always find out. I've been calling you all day. Like, sorry, phone's at home. I can't check my emails because that's my primary source of checking emails, text message.
But with a cell phone versus keys, like there is a relationship. And what I mean by is like you provide input and the cell phone provides input into your life. Like it communicates to you and you communicate to it. With your keys, it's like I
just don't have access now. I can't get in the building.
Right. And it's not like your keys are dinging you saying someone's trying to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
But one of the things you do is you're a smartphone wired guy.
Yep.
So you were telling me about your light bulbs. How does that work?
Oh, well, I set I go different ways on the whole cell phone thing.
Okay.
Because like we talked when you interviewed me last year. We talked about what do you do to lower stress. I turned off a lot of notifications on my phone, so I'm not getting as many dings except for like phone calls and text messages. Like I turned off all the email stuff, every notification, because that sets off your fight or flight. Whenever you get a ding, a notification. But I do like being connected, so or to like know my surroundings. So like I set my I should better say to control my environment at home. So I set all my lights up to be wired in my main floor. Like I have an upstairs tenant. I have it's not a duplex, but I have a rental upstairs.
It's kind of like a duplex, yeah.
Yeah. And so on my main part where I live in my space, I set it all up to a lighting company. Should we even say the brand?
No, but yeah.
Unless they wanted to sponsor us, we'll talk to them later.
But there is a specific light bulb. It's a smart bulb, right?
Yeah. Yep. And there's an app for it.
Uh-huh.
And so when I arrive home at night, like last night I had to work till 10. I was working late, came home, and as soon as I pulled in my driveway, my lights came out of my house, in the selected rooms that I wanted. And certain times of day, if I want, I can have it automatically turn to a certain color of lighting bulb or light bulb in whatever rooms I put these smart bulbs in to set off different signals to your brain to like, time to start winding down.
So they're on like an alarm. So like at 9 o'clock, they'll just automatically change?
Yeah. They will automatically fade to that color if I set it up that way. However you want to do it. It's totally customizable.
That's wild.
It is.
And then you purchased an automated
thermostat. Yep. So as soon as I get home, it starts as soon as I get in within a mile of it, it starts warming up. And so I walk into if it's not warmed up yet, it's like on the way to being warmed up. I'm not having to run to the thermostat and like hover over a register, to try to get heat. And I save a lot of money on the gas bill that way too in the winter, and in the summer on the electric bill of my AC.
So let me ask you this: being the conspiracy theorist that we all know that you tend to be,
yeah.
I mean, are you
who told you that? That's the scary thing. People are talking.
How do you know that? No, but how does that? Aren't you concerned that like people are going to know like your consumption?
Well, to me, it's not a matter of like, oh, Google's going to know I'm coming and going.
Right.
I don't care. Everybody, like, if you got a smartphone, everything's being tracked. And that sounds crazy, but I mean, like, Facebook's in trouble right now with the government because they have record of everything you click like on and every conversation you have. And if you select your microphone to be used on the app, they record everything that's going on around you. And so that's how when you see advertisements on your phone, you're scrolling through Amazon, you see something you were just talking about. Google and Facebook they're controlling or they're gathering analytics on you to know how to advertise in front of you.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I like those two apps. Don't really, talk to my mic. And I don't care if they see me coming or going.
Right. Well, speaking, my wife and I were having a conversation last night about a particular musician who said some things that was kind of controversial. Okay. And we were having this conversation about it and like, okay, people can say whatever they want. If if you have a problem with someone and what they say or whatever, like, well, fine, just shut up. Like, don't listen to their music. And, you don't have to like.
Well, that's the old school way of doing it, but nowadays,
right. And we had that discussion last week. About the reviews and stuff. But I opened up my phone in the middle of the conversation, which annoys the heck out of my wife, which I should not do.
Yeah,
mind you, newlyweds. Let me give you a word of advice. No.
Get a flip phone.
No, but I opened up my phone and there's a picture of this musician and the article about the controversy.
Were you using that as ammunition against your wife? Like, hey, oh yeah? Well, this artist did say that was from the Wikipedia page you were just reading.
She was born in 1987 in a small town of Minnesota. Yeah, exactly. How do you know all this stuff? What do you do with your phone? I was like, I'm on Wikipedia. No, but we're always connected.
Yeah. So wait, going back to the story.
Okay, going back to the story.
No, going back to your story. So when you were saying that, your phone automatically pulled up a picture, like Google did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
It was kind of freaky. It was actually Facebook, not Google, but Facebook pulled up, and I've had that happen too, where like we're talking about a rug, like my buddy. This was really scary. Okay, my buddy was looking for new rugs, okay, for his house. And he was talking to his wife about it. And I say looking, he was not looking on the internet. They were just discussing the purchase, okay? Because the rugs can be pretty expensive, and it's a big rug. And but I'm like, well, what's wrong with your current rug? He's like, well, I just don't like it. It's out of style, okay? So he's talking to his wife about stuff, and up pops an ad for a rug, which isn't odd. Okay.
Yeah.
They heard us talking about rugs, but the rug was the exact one that was under his table that he was getting rid of.
That is creepy.
Same model, color, everything. And he did not go search for it on the internet.
That is crazy.
Do you watch Parks and
Rec?
Yeah.
I used to, yeah.
Did you see the episode where what's the dude's name?
Ron Swanson.
Ron Swanson takes his computer.
That's the only person that I like. Yeah.
He throws the computer in the garbage.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's how my buddy is. He's hardcore, like, he's basically Ron Swanson, but a little bit younger,
Plays the saxophone on weekends.
Yeah. No, he doesn't do that. He doesn't, but he does everything else Ron Swanson does. It's funny that we're friends because we're friends. We've been friends for a long time, but we're very opposite people, But it's just kind of
funny. Did he throw his computer away then?
He did not. I think because he has to work, with it. But I said all that to say, we're constantly connected. You're connected to your house.
Yep. Like I was just showing you, I was turning my lights on and off in your house.
Yeah.
I wasn't turning your lights on and off. To clarify, I was turning my own lights on and off.
Right.
Just showing you the app. Yeah.
And that's crazy to me. Mm-hmm. We're constantly connected. And the one thing I think we are losing connection with is connection with nature.
Yeah.
It's like the Matrix, or something.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're sucked into this other world. And, that's one of the great things about fly fishing or hunting or whatever is just getting out there and like leaving your phone if you can. Just leaving your phone. Like when we go to trout camp, a lot of times because of my cell phone provider, I don't even. I do not. Although it showed that I have plenty of coverage in that area on its big pink map.
Not gonna name any names.
Not gonna name any names. I have no coverage once I get out of like Big Rapids, but
fake news.
No, but it's funny because it's kind of nice that my wife knows too. Like I can't call him about the kids or because he's probably off the grid which is fine for my wife to call, but. Sometimes it's just like you have to disconnect.
Yep.
And I think that's really
important.
Yeah. And Drew talks a little bit about that and why he started his podcast with the Adventure Deficit. A lot of guys, he fly fishes and does some really cool things too. Drew does. But, he's really into helping men. He is like a men's pastor at his church.
Awesome.
And he does this Adventure Deficit podcast. So it's pretty interesting to hear him, and we're always a gracious host. Sometimes we agree with everything. Sometimes we don't with all of our guests, but we're gracious hosts and we're just very happy that he spent some time with us.
Absolutely.
So welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, I'm very excited to return a favor for Mr. Drew De Vries, who is the producer of the Adventure Deficit podcast. Thank you very much for joining us, Drew.
Well, thanks for having me, Jeff. It's great to see you again, man.
Yeah, you as well. We're both Michiganders, I guess. I'm hesitant to say that because I'm a Texan that lives in Michigan, but I guess I'm a Michigander. So there you go.
Yeah, but you're well adopted into the West Michigan fabric by now, I'd say.
As long as they don't put a van in front of my name, I'm okay.
That's right. Van Troutman.
Van Troutman, a real Dutch name. But thanks for hanging out with us today, Drew. So I was actually on your podcast here. I think it was last spring, wasn't it? When it was?
Yeah, I want to say it was April, May.
Yeah, something like that. I came out to your house here in Michigan. You have a great place, a great recording space, better than the one mine in the cornfield. So, but yeah, I appreciate you letting me hang out with you. So I want to ask you a few questions. What was your intention when you started the Adventure Deficit podcast? What was your intention behind that? Why did you do that?
That's a great question. I'd say based purely out of passion. I have a passion for outdoor recreation. My degree is in recreation. I've spent a fair amount of time pursuing those passions around the lower 48 for sure, and had always held space for kind of a creative platform to come into my life, but didn't really have the juice until probably 18 months ago, where a friend said, "Hey, I think I've got an idea for you," and he said, "I've got to believe that some sort of communication platform would serve you well. I've been doing a lot of sales gigs, a lot of account management type positions, and I hit a bit of a rough spot where I think the long and the short of it is I needed some direction in my life, and I had sat down with my wife, and she had encouraged me to kind of start looking for that. And it wasn't maybe a week later where I had a conversation with an old buddy from school who had a lot of audio-visual background and started talking to me about podcasts. Honestly, never really even knew what it was, didn't know how to produce one for sure. But he started talking to me about how easily I could kind of get set up with that. It just takes a recorder and, some basic software. And from there, it was just more or less like, hey, what do you want to talk about? What's on your heart? Where's most of your emotional drive or push come from? And it all had to do with outdoor recreation. So the platform was kind of built around that. And then I whittled it down from there to basically come up with something that was more comprehensive. And from there, started recording.
Now, you said you have a degree in recreation. Can you just can you just explain that to us a little bit? Because I didn't know that was a major. That would have been a nice one to pursue there. So
yeah, so that happens pretty regularly. It happened 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact, where I was at a round table for the Luis Palau convention, and everybody was kind of getting to know each other around this lunch. And I wouldn't say he's older, but a guy probably in his 50s said, "So what do you do? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school?" And I just kind of broke it down for him. And when I said, I went to Calvin College, and I was part of their community rec program, the look on his face was just like, okay, he's messing with me. You know what I mean? So yeah, I've had to kind of break that down for people on a pretty regular basis. But basically, recreation has it doesn't even exist anymore at the college that I went to. I learned that a few days ago, but it is a interdisciplinary focus. There's a lot of liberal arts attached to it, and it has so much loose focus around it that it's tough to define. But I would say there's a lot of leadership theory. There's a lot of community focus as far as like putting together groups of volunteers, or putting together teams, or organizing leagues. The type of work that you would find being done at camps. So camp directors oftentimes will go to school and focus on those type of classes that would be, recreation oriented. There was an off-campus semester that I participated in my junior year, and that was in Gallup, New Mexico. And there was a lot of outdoor recreation focus at that time. So a lot of curriculum that was based on schools such as the National Outdoor Leadership School, or I'm drawing a blank on the other, Wilderness First Responder. You ever heard of your woofer? If somebody's got a woofer, that means they have their Wilderness First Responder certificate, which is basically like backcountry medicine first.
okay.
Yeah, like first case, high level treatment for traumatic type injuries in the backcountry. So yeah, there was a handful of that type of curriculum injected into the program. Which does nothing to answer your question. That's just basically a roundabout way of saying it was an easy way for me to not have to take a second language and still finish a liberal arts school with a 4-year degree.
Now, is one of your children in a Spanish immersion?
There we go.
Why I remember that?
There we go.
Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're sending our firstborn to a Spanish-speaking school, and he will probably show his pops up That's our hope.
Now, don't ask me how I remember that. I have like these weird things. I can't remember to take out the garbage on Thursdays, but I remember.
No, man, that's awesome. That's great.
Immersion.
I don't know how you pulled that one off either, because I don't even know that we had that in the works until, it must have just come to fruition when we met, because that was fairly recent.
Could be a lucky guess too. Could be a lucky guess. Everyone's sending their kids to immersion schools now. Like, that's the trend.
Yeah.
So after college, you weren't you like some kind of river guide or something like that? Like, yeah. So what was that like, and where was that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So going into my senior year, I needed to have an internship under my belt, and circling back to kind of some of the things that the community recreation degree would focus toward would have brought me into a local municipality where I would maybe be doing softball tournaments or planning basketball tournaments or organizing after school programs for the upcoming fall or doing something of that nature, and I didn't want to have any of that. Not that that's not within my wheelhouse, but I'm a bit more of an itchy-footed adventurer, so I kind of wanted to do something that was active. And again, kind of stemming from that passion for outdoor recreation, I just kind of started looking around for opportunities, and I had a buddy who did this the year prior. And this was, he spent a summer out in this little sleepy town in the middle of nowhere. It's called Maupin, Oregon. And Maupin is a really unique place. It's kind of central eastern Oregon, and the Deschutes River flows from Mount Hood up, so it flows northbound to the Columbia River in the Dalles, and it flows through the town of Maupin, and it does something really cool in that town every summer. It goes from a town of 400 people to a town of about 1,500 in a hurry. And everybody comes there to go river rafting. And I talked to this friend of mine who had done a summer of raft guiding for an outfit there. He had an uncle who lived in Maupin and kind of got him plugged in the area. And he came back with just this wild story of a really epic summer, and I wanted all of it, man. I wanted it. So
yeah,
I figured out how to make it happen, and sat down with the chair of the rec department, and we drew up a plan which would include some hours spent in the office, and then couple that with some hours in the guide seat, and it ended up being the manifestation of that was me living in a van down by the river. So there was a rusted out Ford Econoline when I arrived in Maupin, and some of the guides were like, "Hey man, we've been waiting on you. Welcome. These are your digs for the summer." And I was like, "You serious? This is it?" And I didn't come in expecting much, but I just didn't know it was going to be legitimate, like Chris Farley style. So yeah, I threw my bag down and beat the tar out of the single mattress that was sitting in this gutted out van on blocks, and hung my hat.
Wow, that's an amazing story. But this is for a lot of our listeners that may not know this. All of our interviews are usually done over the phone. This is actually my first face-to-face interview, real life interview, so that's interesting. But one of the great things about being face-to-face is I could see your body language, which is really an advantage that I never knew would be so great. But I can tell when you begin to talk about that summer living in the Econoline, like your eyes light up. Like that had to be a great summer.
Oh, yeah. My worldview was a little bit small. It was a little bit short-sighted. So when I arrived in Maupin, it was culture shock through and through. I mean, you got a West Michigan guy who's pretty comfortable in his atmosphere, going into a brand new arena where not only do people not know what your upbringing is like, but you're exposed to stuff that would sit you on your can pretty quick as far as the worldly stuff going on. So all that to say, the folks that I met in that particular summer were some of the kindest and most genuine and most authentic human beings I've interacted with.
Wow.
Yeah, like really good friendships developed. We went through some crazy stuff together that was both good and bad. Actually, on one of my interviews, I interviewed one of the friends that quickly bonded with me. His name is James Samsel, and he had a crazy story. His sister was actually murdered in the first week that we were doing guide training together.
Murdered, not just like died of natural causes, but I mean violent
death. Yeah, she was murdered. There was a federal case surrounding it. It was on the news,
Wow.
and I'm watching this cat that I met 3 days ago, literally melting. I mean, like he fell to his knees and waterworks, snot, the whole thing, and inconsolable. And we're going, this is crazy. What's going on? And yeah, long and short, we heard that, he was kind of, he was shell shocked. He had just heard the worst news he's ever heard. So that's the kind of stuff that, we got a chance to kind of go through together, but, there was the good stuff too, right? Like we had an opportunity to do some awesome stuff together as well. 4-day guided trips down, doing Trout Creek all the way down to, I'm struggling to remember the name of that takeout. I think it was called Pine Junction. Doing multi-day floats like that, doing half-day floats and throwing boats all day with guys who have basically carved out their life around skiing in the winter times and rafting in the summertime. Hanging out with some of the locals and getting to hear what their story's all about, how it's, how it is growing up in a town of 400 people.
Right.
But yeah, just good folks, find a need, take the shirt off of their own back and fulfill the need type of people. And I think what it brought me into was this notion that, I'm a believer, and I believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. But there's this piece where I think some of my early upbringing had me thinking that all of that was true within my circle, right? Mm. But I got to see some of the inherently beautiful things that the Creator has put just in humans of all shapes, sizes, and forms. And I got to see some of that goodness manifest itself in a way that actually challenged what was going on back home. Because I was almost seeing the goodness of Jesus through a subset of folks who didn't live by the Jesus story, and they were doing it better than the folks I grew up with. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of wowed by that. So it made me understand that there were some things that needed to be addressed, and I think it's kind of led me down the path I'm on. So,
I mean, this is kind of an existential thought, but I know, like, my whole college experience, like from 18 to like 24, those are like some of the best years of your young adulthood or whatever, and it seems like those people that you meet in that time period are very special people to you. Mm. And like, I've been married for almost 14 years now, and I've met a lot of people since I've been married that have kind of come and gone out of my life, and like, I lost touch with so-and-so, whatever. But it's like those people that you go to college with, or you have the internships with, or experience some kind of shenanigans, or going through some those are like very close people that will always have a special place in your heart. Would you agree to that, Drew?
Oh, yeah, through and through.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it is about that time period?
Oh, those are huge years. I'd say developmentally, your mind is kind of at the midpoint of this steep climb on the bell curve, right? As far as development, you're getting into those years where adult decisions are being mixed in with childhood and I would say more or less adolescent type behaviors, mm-hmm. and there's some mix there. Not to say that we can't throw in some adolescent behavior in our 30s or 40s or 50s for that matter, but so I would say developmentally, I would say as far as, you're physically capable of anything that you're going to be physically capable at that time. So you get put in roles where you're expected to, fulfill the duties of the job requiring some of that physical labor. So taking care of, a bundle of boats at the end of a day when you're pretty fried out. You've been trying to manage a boat filled with, concerned moms, revved up uncles, and then scared 6-year-olds, and you're trying to navigate how to safely take them all through, class 2, 3, and 4 rapids in a way that's allowing everybody to have a great time, but maintain, a level of safety. And that takes some energy. I mean, at the end of the day, you're fried, but there's a stack of boats that have to go back to the boathouse, So there's some, I would say there's some physical stuff in those ages that puts a fair degree of expectations on you. And that takes, that takes some maturity to kind of pair well with, where you're at in life. I think socially, that's just, man, everybody's spreading their wings during those years. There's a whole lot of exploration going on. What can I do? What can't I do? What's safe? What's harmful? Some of us learn by reading, others learn by doing. Some of us have to screw up 100 times in order to get it right. Some of us have a pretty good knack for getting things right as we go. But again, that's all. A lot of that's taken place in those prime years. I would say 18 to 24. You've got a lot of that going on. So,
yeah, making those adult decisions with somewhat of an adolescent experience and mindset. You don't have that wealth of wisdom from being an idiot. You got to be an idiot. And
first.
Okay, I shouldn't be an idiot.
That's right.
So, while you were in Oregon, is that when you got into fly fishing, or is that something you've always kind of done?
Yeah, that's. I would say that's where I kind of started learning how to fly fish for trout. I had been exposed to some basic fly fishing technique as a youngster. I was about 10 when a guy named Blake Forsland from our community kind of took me up under his wing and allowed me to kind of flourish in this outdoor setting. And he allowed me to flourish in this outdoor setting by offering to be kind of my stand-in grandpa. Both of my grandpas died when I was young, and my dad and some of his mentors didn't necessarily understand, how all of the traditional sports worked. They were, and when I say traditional sports, maybe that's the wrong term to use. My dad and his friends were more into, football, basketball, hockey, soccer, that type of stuff. And I was fine in that area. I liked all that, but I always had this passion for going outside and, shooting squirrels or going outside and, spearing frogs or catching stuff. So he had this mentor through the local Rotary Club named Blake Forsland, who was also big into all of that stuff. And he offered to kind of take me up under his wing. So I always called him Grandpa, and my grandpa Blake was the guy who taught me how to fly cast. I might have been 9 or 10. So, but then when I got out, I was only catching panfish and crappie. I wasn't chasing trout until I got out to Oregon. Yeah.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening. We're just going to take a break from the podcast, from the episode. Drew is what an awesome guest, and he's got some great stories coming up here after the break. Wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of things. Number one, we're putting together a trip to Chile, and we would love to have you come along. We're going with Joseph Kane, legendary fly angler and fly guide down there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's not something that we're going to do all the time. We're not a fly fishing travel agency. It's just a trip with some friends. And if it's something that you'd be interested in, go to remotenopressure.com and click on travel and find out all the details, what's going on. Also, Christmas is coming. It's coming very quickly. So we've partnered with Flood Tide, with Paul Puckett and the boys over at Flood Tide, and they're offering our listeners a 25% discount at checkout when you enter in remote no pressure at checkout. Now, one of his prints is just amazing. It's Willie Nelson, okay, holding a trout. And if you know me, that's basically my life. Music by Willie Nelson and fly fishing. Outside of my family, those two things can pretty much sum up who I am. So go check out that print too. Again, you can go to floodtideco.com, enter in remote no pressure at checkout, and receive a 25% discount. Thank you guys so much. And we're going to get back to the episode, and Drew's going to tell us a story about hanging out with his cousin and going fishing. It's an amazing story. Let's get back to the podcast.
All game, I'm all in. But first, we're going to go to his spot in Portland and hang out with Chris and the kids and just catch up on family stuff. So we did dinner, and it was good to see family. And the next morning, we were sitting there in his garage with, our cups of coffee and just kind of going through some of the details that he had planned out for the day. And we weren't going to start off fishing. He had planned a motorcycling tour up the backside of Mount Hood, and basically we just spent the better part of that morning just loading up 2 enduro bikes. He had the KTM 450, and I jumped on the KLR 650, and we had those things geared up like we were ready for Thunderdome. It was
Mad Max style, right?
For sure. For sure. Everything was strapped on, clicked in, cargo netted, and we ended up having, all of the right ingredients for a proper adventure. It was pretty cool. We even had a rifle strapped to the back of my I don't know if that's legal, but we had a little 17 caliber Savage strapped to the back of my bike inside of a case, of course. But yeah, I did. Obviously, when you load up like that, you're going, what are we getting into, right? So John's buddy, Ross, comes rolling in. Didn't know he was part of the plan, but he had been briefed. He knew what was up. So he had all his, all of his toys along and strapped onto the fairings in the back of his bike as well. And the three of us rode off, and we were tearing through subdivisions and then jumped on to the highway for a short stint. And before long, we were on these 2-laners that if you've ever been in the Pacific Northwest and you get into these 2-laners that are shaded by Douglas firs, it can be otherworldly.
Wow.
Yeah, man. You've got towering, trees that are, they've got to be 100 and change. They're 100 feet tall.
Wow. And
they create this crazy maze-like experience where if the sun's not high, you're driving around in the dark, but you curve through these pockets of sunlit, highway, and you breathe in the fresh mountain air, and it's just, there's something about twisting the throttle on a machine that's humming between your legs at 70 miles an hour, knowing you're about to get into the goods, that just brings life.
Yeah.
Brings life, man. I was cheesing out. Like, I was literally giggling under my helmet.
How could you not be? That's amazing.
Yeah. So we tear off into these rutted out fire roads, and we're ripping through some pretty heavy water barriers. They basically break up the trail with these mounds of dirt that would keep runoff from creating a side stream in the event of a rain. So you're basically ripping through a whoops section on a 650 bike, and it weighs 300 pounds, loaded up with gears. So it takes a minute to get used to it. And these guys have been kind of doing that on the weekends from the get, but
right.
This was new territory for me, so I'm kind of focused on that. But after 20 or 30 minutes of that, we break into this opening, and it was the first time that I had a chance to see her. But there stands Mount Hood.
Wow.
Snow-capped, sun glistening off of the glaciers in all of her glory. It was, I mean, I got a photo of it up on my website. This is one of the coolest moments, man. We parked the bikes and we actually went and grabbed some water from what I understand was a spring that was in the old Oregon Trail. So it was part of the kind of the early infrastructure of the West.
Wow.
So, ended up just kind of playing around on the dirt bikes all day, really. Shot at targets with the 17. Ended up having a local law enforcement agent come check out, to make sure we were legit. Mm-hmm. Everything was okay. We weren't shooting over any roads, and we were. I think it was like we got to be 150 yards from the road or something like that. But yeah, we were within regs and didn't end up getting a citation for anything. But that was a little bit scary. We ended up coming back that evening, and then made it an early night because the next morning, John had planned a crazy fun fishing trip on the Santiam. So we did the next morning much the same, grab coffee and then get ready for an adventure. Mm-hmm. The Santiam was new water for both of us, and he had booked a guide, a local guide named Barrett. This guy was kind of up and coming at the time, but just showed a lot of early talent, and John had used him before, and went ahead and booked with him again because Barrett's a pretty solid guy, and getting to know him after an afternoon of fishing was pretty fun. But Barrett had already kind of loaded up our all of our gear, so all we really needed was our waders and sunglasses.
Right.
But drove out to the Santiam, jumped in the boat, and it was kind of starting to get light out. And we were going through some of the basics. Barrett was kind of reacquainting me with some of the basics on spay casting, just kind of peeling back, and some of kind of the positions and techniques that you would use in order to properly, send a fly. Mm-hmm. And I was honestly just kind of meddling around. Like I had no real target when I casted because we were kind of fishing for fish down on the bottom of our cast anyways. So I threw one out there and let it drift a bit, and Barrett was kind of confirming what I was doing. He was saying, yeah, just do it kind of like that. And he was literally telling me that they were starting to take him on the swing when I felt that first head strike. It just bam, 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 bam. So we were all kind of laughing, like, what are the chances, Wow. I can't believe this. This is the first time, you don't wet a line and catch a steelhead. It just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
These are the fish of 10,000 casts, right?
Right.
And we got it on video, so I'll have to get that for you. You're gonna have to snag that and maybe put it up on the site or something.
Yeah, we will. If you get that to me, we'll put it up. But hooking a steelhead in the Pacific Northwest, it's got to be a pretty amazing experience for a Michigan guy.
Oh, without a doubt. We have great migratory fisheries here in Michigan.
Oh yeah.
But I just there's something really truly unique and cool about catching them in a place where, I don't want to make it sound like I know all of the history, but I think it kind of all started there. As far as the breeding and the farming of steelhead as more or less a replaceable resource or a sustainable resource.
Right.
So we were catching fish that had actually been clipped. So their lower fin is clipped.
Okay.
So that would, some people say that's less ideal. You want to catch a real salmon or steelhead that wasn't raised in a hatchery, and right. I understand the thinking there, but man, they pull just fine for me.
Heck yeah, for sure.
So yeah, some of them were hatchery steelhead. A couple wild steelhead did come into the net, but it was a crazy day, and crazy is an understatement for the guys who can fully appreciate what a good steelhead day is. Because if you put two, steelhead, whether they're bucks or hens, if you put 2 fish to hand in one day, that's a good day.
It's a great day.
It's a good day. Yeah. I will tell you, without a hint of fisherman's tale, that no longer than 3 casts after I landed that first buck, I swear to you, I got another hit. And my guys were like, get out of town. What do you have some sort of like blessing before you come out here or what, pal? So that just kind of set off the standard. Within 5 minutes, we had 2 fish in the net. Throughout the rest of the day, we ended up putting 5 more fish to hand. So, probably 13 takes in all and seven to hand. It was a great day.
A great steelhead day for sure.
It was nuts, man.
So what has fly fishing done for you mentally, spiritually? How has it affected you in your, like, say, your mental health? I know you said you've had a lot of jobs, you've had a lot of different careers, you've done a lot of different things. But what's consistent is your love for the outdoors. How's that outdoor experiential therapy helped you?
Yeah. So without getting too shticky, and kind of selling my own juice here, the whole premise behind adventure deficit is based on this notion that our culture is so wired for work. We're great at that. We know what we're doing when it comes to work. We pour our energy into that with 100% of what we got. But for many of us, we've got no idea what it looks like to hit reset. That hasn't been modeled to many of us. And my passion for the outdoor sports has always been there, and it's always been something that's been therapeutic for me. So in the adventure deficit, wheelhouse, I've dubbed that taking your medicine, right?
Like AD, attention deficit.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Attention deficit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Adventure deficit.
I mean, my whole premise is to take, the platform of outdoor recreation and use it in order to show people what the benefits of outdoor adventure can bring. And it's across every discipline. I'm not just into fishing. I love fishing, don't get me wrong, but I love to hunt, right? I like to backpack. I love to paddle. I love alpine skiing. I love it all,
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say it goes in line with that. No pun intended.
Right.
It falls in line with that. Fishing's always been an awesome way for me to get out there and hit reset.
Right. It's funny because when I worked in finance, I worked on a big team, and I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and his 7th habit is sharpen the saw, which is actually relaxing and recuperate. We're really good at the other 6, but you feel guilty when you take number 7, or you feel like it's not productive time. So I was on this huge team, and I'm not going to say anybody's name or anything like that, but I remember getting called in by the head of the team, and he's like, you need to get better at your craft, you need to go sharpen the saw and get better. And his idea of sharpening the saw was to become sharper in your craft. And I'm sitting there because I don't want to be a jerk, like a know-it-all, but I'm thinking like, that's not what it means at all. It's about resting and recuperating and regenerating your mind, through rest and relaxation. And I think, especially as busy professionals, and I know we have a lot of finance people who listen to the podcast, we have a lot of doctors, and just that whole demographic of really A-type personalities, type A personalities, it's drive all the time. It's hard to calm down and just say, I need to sit here and fly fish.
Totally. Yeah, we've got an interesting culture. We've got a culture that thrives off of excellence. We've got a lot of folks who draw near to kind of the mantra that moderation's for sissies. Kind of that. Have you seen the what's the one about Operation Red Wings? It's the Navy SEAL Team 6 precursor that did Operation Red Wings, the Marcus Luttrell story.
Oh yeah.
Awesome story, right?
Right.
A bunch of heroes. But there's a quote in there where they're going through kind of that Navy SEAL mantra where they say, moderation's for the weak or moderation's for sissies. Or I don't remember exactly how they word it, but our culture has adopted that in such a way where I think we sometimes forget that to be human, you can't possibly be a machine. Right? Like, and this goes back to kind of some of that fabric that I talk about being kind of steeped in the traditional evangelical culture. But I believe that we were created to hit reset. It's a mandate, and honor the Sabbath is something that's oftentimes looked at as like, oh, that's just one more rule to follow. If you look at that within the context of the Creator gave us an opportunity to be fully human and to take a day for ourselves in such a way where we can be special. We can be other than. We don't have to be the machine that we watch the rest of the world operating on. We're set apart. And it's not so much a suggestion, it's a mandate. He tells us to honor the Sabbath by keeping it holy. And that's almost, in my mind, like, fast forward into today's language, that's like, hey, find yourself some space and protect it vehemently. Honor that time in a way that will allow you to recharge, and then go back for those other 6, man. Go get them. You know what I mean?
7 habits, 7 days.
I don't know. Yeah. Ironic, to say the least, right?
Well, if people want to listen to your podcast or learn more about you and what you're doing with the Adventure Deficit, how would they get a hold of you? How would they listen to your podcast? What can we give them for you?
Yeah, man. So I do. I'm bad at consistently filling the pipeline with guests. I love doing this, but unfortunately it doesn't always pay the bills. So I do other work in order to pay the bills. As far as new episodes, I've got a couple new ones coming down the pipeline, and if you are at all interested in checking those out, you can find them at www.adventuredeficit.com, all one word. And deficit is DEFICIT. Or you can find us on Google Play or on iTunes.
Well, great. Well, we'll be sure to put up all of your links on our website and send it out to everybody in our mailing list. Go to remotenopressure.com/blog, and you can read all about the Adventure Deficit and what Drew's up to, what's driving him, links to his website and his podcast. It's very interesting, and what I really like about it is it's very high quality. Like, your audio is good. You can tell you really, really dig into that. And Drew, what you're doing is very important to mankind. I know mankind is a whole, but like,
yeah, it's
all of mankind, but
the whole world.
But it's really important in society. We forget that 7th habit, and I just really appreciate all you do, and we'll do everything we can to get you some downloads and people check them out. So thank you very much.
Dude, a lot of that goes right back to you, Jeff. I think you got an awesome thing going too. I appreciate you kind of carving out some time to hear my story. I've not been on this end of the mic, so it's a little bit uncomfortable, but uncomfortable is good. Growth takes place in uncomfortable. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and yeah, keep tuning into Jeff, because he's got a cool platform and he's doing some great stuff too. So that's right back at you, man.
All right. Thanks a lot. Well, thank you so much for joining us on another week of the Remote No Pressure Podcast. Stay tuned this Wednesday for another story from Bear. If you guys noticed, last Wednesday we started the series Stories with Bear. It's going to be some great stories. If you could do us a favor, it greatly helps us if you could leave a review on our sites, whatever platform you're listening, and also check out our social. And until next time, go fishing.